What does it mean to be a poet?
What does it mean to be a poet? What does it mean to be anything?
Right. That's such a poet's answer.
What does it mean to be anything beyond a job title? You know, I've always had labels my whole life. Like, I've always been like the ballet one or the tall one, like, or the posh one, you know? And I don't love it. I don't love labels, but owning your art. I mean, because, you know, actors have this a lot. You know, what does it mean to be an actor? Does it mean you're booking work? Does it mean you're famous? Does it mean that you're doing an Amdram play? Or does it mean that your favourite hobby is learning monologues and performing them to your cat? Like, is that an actor? Like, I think it's the same with poetry. I think if you write poems, you're a poet, full stop. I wouldn't go as far as say that if you like to read poetry, you're a poet, but because I think to be a poet, it is the act of creating that kind of art. And I would call it art, but yeah, I think to be a poet is to feel a lot about something and decide to write it down in a way that enhances the depth and the meaning, or translates it into something that forms an image for others or yourself.
Three, two, one. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Jeoffrey Sarpong podcast. Today I'm here with Marina. Marina, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm enjoying the fact that we're in the park.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
We found a new park. This is a new park. First time this park has made its introduction in this podcast, so I'm also happy to be here. You hear things going past, hopefully not too much, but I am also very, very happy to be here. Quick background of how we met and why we're here for this conversation today. So I met Marina at the Moroccan Bound Poetry Open Mic, where I've seen you perform and you've seen me perform. And I remember the first time I saw you perform, I was like, oh my God, incredible, that's amazing. And we're telling you that, we had a conversation about it.
I said the same thing.
We had a conversation about it, and then obviously I followed you on your shows, and I've just seen the kind of the the poetry you've been posting there, and like I've really related to some of them, and especially one I've talked about like 3 times now, the migrating birds. I really relate to that one. I really relate to a lot of your poetry, so I thought I'd get you on here to kind of speak more about your journey and just kind of like deep into the poetry,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Get digging.
Let's get digging into it. So okay, so first off, talk to me about that. Start with poetry, huh?
Poetry, man.
Poetry, man. Talk to me about your relationship to poetry at the beginning. What was it like for you at the beginning?
Well, I didn't really have that much exposure to poetry at the beginning. I just studied it at school a little bit, like everyone has to. But the first time I ever wrote anything mildly poetic was kind of, I used to call it descriptive writing. And I just write really metaphorical, descriptive things. But I remember like the first formed poem I ever wrote was when I was in Europe. I had a very weird post-school launch into life, and it meant that I spent a very large amount of time alone. And so I started writing when I was doing that, and I wrote a poem about mountains that I was looking at. And that was kind of the beginning, but I never thought that I'd start sharing it.
So the descriptive writing, what was it? What was the impetus like? Where did that come from? Obviously, you said you were alone in your thinking. Was it like just awe of these mountains, or where did it come from?
I think extreme emotion and wanting to find a comparison to it, like wanting to see something external that could describe or relate or compare to how I felt inside. And I've always used very strong metaphors with like nature. I mean, to the point where I mock myself about it, and my friends probably also mock me too, because I'm always comparing stuff to nature. But I think that's because that's where it all started. And I remember I wrote this poem. It was about this mountainscape in Innsbruck in Austria. I was trying to get a job there, and I didn't get it, and I was really sad. And it was like I did a lot of job auditions. We're talking over 50 for work. Yeah. And it was really tiring. And I remember I just sat there and I looked at the snow and the snow was really grim. Like it was melting away. It was like tired. And then there was like really fancy snow above that was really fresh, and I was like, this, like,
Right there.
that snow couldn't choose where it landed. Neither could I. So then it became a poem.
I love that. I love that so much because I relate to that idea of when you see things. And I know we were talking about before about how I feel like poets have a very unique way of viewing the world. Like you could see a snow, you know, 2 different types of snows, and you know, you see a poem in that. Someone sees it and goes, "I need to get inside. It's too cold." You know, we have a very different way of viewing the world.
This has so much meaning.
This has so much meaning. You see a leaf, you're, oh my God, what does this mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like in that, and I think that's what I want to focus on today for the broad topic of this conversation. I want to try to dig into that for people to understand how the mind of a poet works that way, that descriptive kind of like representation of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm fascinated by how that works for other people, and I'm trying to really delve into that. But on the topic of you obviously starting that, you know, descriptive poem. So when did that start from that to change from like, okay, now I'm writing poetry? Well, how was that shift for you?
I feel like it's difficult to talk about that shift without you knowing more about me and like my life, because I think it's very like it's very hand in hand. Like I used to be a ballet dancer, and a lot of the time I spent alone was me traveling, trying to get work, because that's how it is. And so that was when I first started to write stuff. But the thing is that I then had to stop very abruptly, and then I spent a lot of time after I'd stopped just feeling so incapable of expression. And like when your whole like work, your income, your life is all around just daily expression, and you suddenly don't have an outlet for that anymore. That's when I think it shifted for me. And I think that I wasn't very well for a period of time. And so there was a combination of seeing inspiration online and sort of seeing artists that I thought were just so like really, they really moved me, but also I thought to myself, like, I have a lot of that in me. And so I would just get to these headspaces, to be honest, a lot of negative headspaces, and then I'd find ways to write about that in ways that felt beautiful. And how could I make this thing that's really painful actually like a very sort of not femme fatale or whatever, but like how do I shape it? I mean, it's hard to even talk about because it's more of a locked in hypnotic kind of that. I don't find that I'm particularly conscious when I'm writing my best work. I'm just in a daydream scribbling. If I ever try and sit down and just write and make that shift, it's never as good.
I completely agree, and I want to touch on that point too. I feel like I have this idea, it was a saying that I say, it's like ideas have people. I think especially when you're writing a poem that means so much to you, it feels like it brews in the back of your mind for so long, months even, without you kind of having the clarity.
Without you knowing, yeah.
And then once you feel that, it's the feeling, it's a really intangible feeling of like, oh, it's kind of ready to come out now. And you just kind of have to just allow yourself to kind of like express that, you know. And I think the skill is in understanding how and when to, like, what to keep, almost like, okay, how do I form this, you know, in my mind always is like I'm crossing a river and I'm stepping on stones throughout that river, and some stones I'll sink, but some stones will be the right kind of like, you know, and it's like I use a word or a phrase like that's not quite right, you know, that's not what I'm trying to say. And then
so you're someone that builds it brick by brick with your writing?
It builds brick by brick in my mind, but when it comes out to writing it, it just all...
That's nice.
It's very difficult for me to like build it and sit, like you were saying, sit down and try to like formulate it, because I'm like, what? I don't have anything to say almost, you know?
That's why it's a shit hobby. It's not a hobby. Because you can't say, this is my biggest frustration with poetry, you can't decide to sit down and do some poetry. It just doesn't work like that. I don't think, not for me and maybe for some people, but I can't be like, oh, I'm going to spend a nice afternoon back for myself, write some poetry. No, it's always when I'm on a really crappy street where someone's just stolen something and I'm like, oh, I've got an idea, and then I got to sit down and like, or on a really horribly crowded train, or like when I'm really, really upset about something, and then suddenly it comes and there's the thought and it's there in 10 seconds, and unless I write it down or record my voice or whatever, it's gone.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I'll write down a few keywords and think I'll return to it, and then I never find it again.
There's so many poems, so many lines, like I think it's exactly the same, that have like lines. I'm like, oh, that's a really good line, but it doesn't find a home anywhere because it doesn't mean anything.
Because it's not about words.
Yeah.
It's not about words, it's about meaning.
It's about meaning.
That's bottom line, I think, although I'm no expert.
I mean, we write poetry. That's all we say. We don't need to be experts on that. But you mentioned like at the beginning you were like inspired by people that you would watch. Talk to me about that period. Like, what was it? What kind of people were you watching? How were they inspiring you?
Yeah. So I came across. I'm very strong believer that of social media is. It really can be a facilitator for good and for creation. And I think there was that period of time, maybe people remember it, when like between about 2015 and 2019, 2020, Instagram was a very different place. It was such a place to put lovely pictures on, and people would see them, or like create a little video 3 minutes long. People could watch it. Like that was a period of time where a lot of art was booming online, and it was really good for people who were at-home artists or freelancers who weren't, didn't have an open scratch night or anything. And I think during that time, I came across some online poets, namely one, like I want to shout them out, but everyone's going to know who they are. It's Whitney Hansen. But she is gorgeous to watch and so talented. And every single word hit with me, and just her experiences. And I remember I went through a period of time where I had an anthology already of about 30 poems. And I started trying to record them and write them and perform them. And I recorded every single one of them. And they still sit in my drafts today, because I never shared them, because I didn't feel confident enough to share them, and I didn't like how I looked at the time, and I was dealing with symptoms and stuff. But I have them still, all the original recordings of when I felt it and who I was when I wrote them. And now when I share them, it's just such a different experience, like we were talking about earlier. The difference between performing on a feeling and acting a previous sentiment is a very different experience.
That's so fascinating to me, especially that the inspiration. For me, like, my inspiration was George the Poet. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No, I haven't.
So he's like, again, he was also a poet that you would perform online. And I think it was such a, I related to him so much because he was from the kind of place I was from, but he was able to kind of describe the things I would see, but in words.
Well, I might have heard of him actually, but I'm more of a face recognizer. So.
Yeah, you probably recognize this.
Yeah.
Recognize this. I mean, the name like George the Poet is pretty like not that memorable. But no, I feel like it was, and that's kind of when I kind of understood that this was a way of self-expression. I've always known poetry to be Shakespeare. I love reading. I love classics, and I think for me, poetry was always the classics. Robert Frost, Whitman. Like
Hardy for me.
Yeah,
Hardy for me for sure.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit depressing, but like I think that's the irony. Like there you go. Like I studied. The only poet I really studied at school was Thomas Hardy.
Yeah.
And all of his poems are so bleak, but then some of them are so strong in image, like, and a lot of them are very, centralized around nature and those metaphors and the passage of time. And like I think that really influenced me. That and bloody Jane Austen. Like I'm not a big reader, and I wish that I was, but my mind is too manic to settle on a text. But I was for a period of time able to settle on some things, and Austen was up there. And again, it's very quaint, but it's really clever and it's funny. And I mean, everybody knows that. I don't need to say that, but I think that is a big inspiration. But namely, the sharing spoken word was definitely from online.
When you saw it, did you immediately think, oh, I could do this? Or was it just like a interest or curiosity at the beginning that you kind of slowly built up on?
I think it was a fixation. I think it became something that was very comforting to me, and something that I think being exposed to very sensitive, outwardly sharing people that I hadn't yet met. I hadn't met them in my workforce. I hadn't met them in my personal life. I'd always been the most sensitive friend, the most vulnerable friend, the one that would always overshare or get emotional about everything. And then to find people like that online, I think I felt a likeness, and I felt like almost like a companionship, not in a like, oh, you're now my friend, but like I was very mesmerized by them. And then I think probably quite quickly I was like, I could do that, maybe. I could try. I'm a performer and I like that. And But it took me another couple years after that first inspiration and first time I recorded everything to actually go back and start again and build up a whole presence and name for myself. When I say name for myself, I mean actually like a name that I want for myself in poetry. And that took a heartbreak to do that.
Always does.
Always does.
Always does. For every poet.
Yeah.
So it's so cursed.
Yeah.
But okay, you mentioned the anthologies that you put together, and you started like recording really, really early on before you even kind of started that. When you were writing that anthology, what was the feeling? And the reason I asked that, right, is that I always feel like, for me, my first poem was like a build up of so much emotions. Like once I realized that this was a thing where I could, unpack prior memories or prior feelings or prior situations I'd been through in my life, it was like a real long build up of this thing. And I'd had this poem which is like 3-4 minutes long that I'd written over like course of like 6 months, but it was like a really like long, and I kind of like made a metaphor of me having conversations with my aspirations and my talents that I thought I had in the form of a ghost and dream. And so it was like, for me, it was like unpacking stuff.
When you say you had it building up and brewing, do you mean like the words are brewing or just the feelings that then eventually you needed to put into words?
I think the second part, it was the feelings
yeah.
So like I felt like I understood, it gave me an opportunity to go back and like reflect on a lot of feelings that I had that I just wouldn't have the voice.
Wouldn't have had it, yeah.
Exactly, like to be able to like explain it, right? And so like after I understood that, I was like, oh, okay, this thing that I thought about, this relationship that happened, or this thing, perspectives that I had, I can actually now verbalize it. I can actually use words to kind of describe that situation.
You're now ready to.
I'm ready to kind of like.
There is such a big difference between that, I feel.
Did you feel like similar for you when you're writing the anthology, or was it completely different?
Yeah, I think that they were things that I had been experiencing for probably over a decade. Actually, definitely over a decade. They were all very different themes. I remember my first sort of 10 poems. The first one that I knew I was writing a poem was all about betrayal, but not romantic betrayal. It was about, I think it was probably referring to about 5 different betrayals in different parts of my life, from people to bosses to careers to body functions, just so much letting down. And it was a poem that I felt like I had to write, which was about when you have an inkling that something is wrong, but you convince yourself that you're just overthinking it. But then all along you were right. And you should have acted on it, but you were weak. And that was what my first ever, I'm writing this poem. It's very short. It's very punchy and sharp. But other ones were very different. There was one about body dysmorphia, because I come from this ballet background. It's just it's so key to the entire industry. And it just felt so empowering to be able to, I think there's something quite indulgent with poems about sort of discovering your own ability to play with the words and find ways to put even more punch and meaning into a phrase. And like you can, say something, you could say, the grass is green, but you can say it in a way that sounds horrible or romantic or,
Absolutely.
And I think it's nice because it feels like you can take something that is an emotion, or even it might already be a strong emotion, and just make it so much more than it feels. Where you can't do that without the poetic element, I don't think.
No, I completely agree. I think what it allows you to do as a poet is that it gives you a different relationship with these feelings, right? Like, and I think I love unpacking feelings, especially because you might have this idea about a feeling that you had previously, and then you start writing about it, and your using metaphors, similes, or even like how you compare it to something else. That juxtaposition gives you clarity over it. It's like, oh, maybe I was viewing this in the wrong way. Maybe this like deep romantic heartbreak was actually the beginning of something new, because you make that comparison in the poem.
It's funny when you finish a poem and you're like, wait, like, I think I've just realized I was wrong all along. Like,
Literally.
And it's not even metaphors, is it? Like sometimes it's just, if I say this experience or this sentence in a certain rhythm or in a way where I'm giving it traction, you can, I wrote one poem more recently about the city and how it sort of feels really sick. And I don't perform as much, but I remember that it has to be performed really fast. It has to be done so fast that people feel like they're tripping trying to keep up with what you're saying, and then you stop to make people realize how freaking stressed they feel and that's fun. Like that's really fun, and
Train
it's
it
not
from
metaphor.
itself.
It's just no. I want you to feel really quite frustrated and
Yeah.
anxious, and then I'm going to be like, let's just stop for a
Let's just
second.
stop and let's reset. No, 100%. And like the feeling of actually performing it too, like you're talking about, that like you're obviously giving this thing to a group of people, but the emotion that you feel after you've done that, you know, maybe you've done it successfully or whatever, you know, we always have this thing, oh, I could have done this better. But even after trying that, the effort of trying, there is a cathartic feeling to it, you know. It's like you come off stage and you feel like, oh, okay, like I delivered that. It's almost like I was talking to a friend about this, where it's like getting, you know, she compared it to getting your inoculation. You know, if you have a feeling or something you've been dealing with for a long time, and you form into a poet or a creative piece, and you perform that, you kind of letting go of that, and it's like, okay, look, this thing that I have, you can go back to it years later and be like, oh, that was me. It's a process of me figuring that out. Next question I had for you was that you were talking about writing poems and stuff like that. Is there a difference for you? Is there a tension for you from like writing a poem and just keeping it to yourself and to performing it on stage? Is there like, in your mind, was there like a process of like, okay, now I'm a poet, and that only come when you start performing it?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think when I first started writing poems, I liked the idea that I might be able to share them. Like maybe I'd ring my mum and be like, oh, I've written something, can I read it? Or my best friend at the time.
Yeah.
But I think almost always it was just me creating something. Now, I definitely would say there's a difference between poems I write for myself and ones that I would share. I think there's always a part of the show off in me that's like, oh, I'd love to perform all of them because let's just share everything. Let's be generous. And it's always nice to have feedback and to see how it affects someone. But I do think there are a very large number of poems that I've never shared. But I think that is partly, it's a very, very small amount of that is to do with the fact that I'd rather keep them for myself. And I think a lot more of it is to do with the kind of person I am and feeling self-conscious around presenting in a certain way. You know, I've got some that are really dark. I've got some about addiction and certain kinds of addiction, because I feel like the second you throw that word around, everyone's like, oh, you're that kind of person, are you? Which is actually like, you know, you can be addicted to walking, but like I've got other ones that are very much about specific people, and I think that's a really big subject for me that I struggle with, which is the fact that a lot of the people that support your writing are people that know you, and then they can't separate you from the subject and from what you're saying, and there's this want to perform in order to reach people who don't know you, who will only know your words, and be able to then finally, because I want someone to hear my poem and think of themselves and think of how it relates to them and put it into their life and feel like I'm representing something they feel. But I think that's really hard for people to do when they're trying to subconsciously read into why she wrote that. Why did Marina write that? I know what she's been doing lately. Who's that about? Is that about the time she missed the bus? Because I know she did. Like, you know.
100% agree. You can see me nodding away, because it's such a I think a common feeling for most poets, and I think it's so interesting too, because you feel like almost the way, like, because I'll write things and I'll try to like, I don't want to be too obvious almost sometimes, in case they think it's like it's about them or it's about someone.
Limiting yourself.
Exactly. So you put yourself in that box, and so you have to just let go of that.
Totally.
And just say whatever you feel like saying, and then have to deal with that. You know, like I have a thing, I don't talk about my poems with my friends. Because if they ask me about it, I'm like, I just don't talk about it. It's like, I'll leave it in the poetry. If you understood it, you understood it. If you don't, then maybe it wasn't, you know, that wasn't the one for you to understand, you know? Because it kind of gets into, so who was that about? Who were you meant to? And it's like, I have to explain it now. It's like, that's not what it was about.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to push myself lately to perform ones that I keep close to my heart. But I still can't bring myself to post them online, because they're just they're either very relevant or incredibly obvious as to who they're about. But just because I feel like you can't let that stop you, because creative, like an inspiration, like flame is an inspiration flame no matter what it is, and it'll just snub out if you don't use it. Absolutely. Like you have to, because otherwise it just blocks the way for the next one.
And at a certain point, it's not even about you. Like, you know, like I think the time I started like releasing myself, and I think this leads into my next question about taking on an identity of a poet, right? It was me kind of like realizing that I wrote a poem about a girl and then I sent it to her. Like,
did you?
Yeah,
we've been there.
And I sent it to her. I was like, you know, I don't want to have this thing just hold me back from like writing, or like have this thing that's like so deep, and it's like, you know, I gotta like let go of the tension of it. So I sent it to her, and obviously you don't get a reply when you send poems to people most of the time.
Oh, don't you?
Do you get a
You're
reply?
sending them to the wrong people.
That's probably true, you know. That's probably true. You're 100% right.
I'm so happy to know there are other people out there who share poems.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes they don't reply, and you're like,
I sat in the park once and read one to my friend.
Really?
That I wrote for her.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Because the reaction of it, how do you even deal with that? So,
I don't know. To be honest, I've done some poetry sharing recently, and it's been very cathartic.
Okay, fair.
But then it's funny because then I feel like when it's very much about someone for someone, it's almost less satisfying when you share it publicly, because it's never going to have more meaning than between you and the person that it's about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's weird.
And they almost don't understand everyone else, right? Okay, but the question I had on top of that was, when did you start like affirming yourself as a poet, like taking on the identity, or like do you still struggle with that? What does it mean to be a poet?
Yeah, wow. Ooh, that's lots of questions in one. So I've created the concept of me being a poet when I started to share videos online of spoken word. I call myself Winnie the Poetry Lass because I love Winnie the Pooh. It's so beautifully metaphorical, and my nickname at home is Winnie. And so that was like the name, but I don't think I would have ever created that sort of name that then makes me feel like I have an identity if it weren't for social media. I think, God, what's the second part of that question? Second part of the question.
What is poetry? What is
poetry?
What does it mean to be a poet?
What does it mean to be a poet? What does it mean to be anything?
Right. That's such a poet's answer.
What does it mean to be anything beyond a job title? You know, I've always had labels my whole life. Like, I've always been like the ballet one, or the tall one, like, or the posh one, you know. And I don't love it. I don't love labels, but owning your art. I mean, because, you know, actors have this a lot. You know, what does it mean to be an actor? Does it mean you're booking work? Does it mean you're famous? Does it mean that you're doing an Amdram play? Or does it mean that your favourite hobby is learning monologues and performing them to your cat? Like, is that an actor? Like, I think it's the same with poetry. I think if you write poems, you're a poet, full stop. I wouldn't go as far as say that if you like to read poetry, you're a poet, but because I think to be a poet, it is the act of creating that kind of art. And I would call it art, but yeah, I think to be a poet is to feel a lot about something and decide to write it down in a way that enhances the depth and the meaning, or translates it into something that forms an image for others or yourself.
I agree with that. I think the reason I asked that question, right, is it's twofold. First off, I feel there's a tension amongst people who write, because you are right. To be a poet is just to feel something and try to like communicate it. That's such a human thing. Like, everyone can do that. Everyone literally can do.
No, I don't think anyone can do it.
And so it's like
a lot of people have a very cynical attitude towards poetry. A lot of people.
What do you think that is?
Because it's traditional, I think. I think poetry has a very traditional, and I think it's associated with the poets. You know, with kind of, and like, you know, people go, oh yeah, roses are red, violets are blue. But like, I guess that I can't even imagine. I'm sure there must have been a time when I felt like that.
Yeah.
But then I also used to write little rhyming couplets and birthday cards for my parents when I was a kid, like, because I'm eccentric like that. Like, I think
I'm about it like that. I'm a poet like that.
You know, like, I don't know. I haven't had many people questioning the term poet, to be honest. I haven't. I'm improvising all this right now. Like, this is new stuff for me to talk about. I haven't talked. I'm blabbing now.
No, please go on. Keep going.
I haven't talked much about my poetry with anyone.
Yeah.
This is the first full-length conversation I've ever had about it. I've never analysed it. I've talked about a specific poem. I've said I've written a poem. I've shared a poem. I've said, oh yeah, I write poems now, but I've never ever delved this deep with anyone before. So I I'm kind of shocked at what I'm saying in response.
That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. And I think that's what it is. That's a conversation, right? You just kind of like, you don't know what's gonna come up. You just say what you feel. And the reason I like doing that, like I said at the beginning, because I feel like you're right. Poets have this is an internal world, right? It's very much internal, which you sometimes share with the external, and then whatever the external says, it's like, okay, how much do I let this affect me? How much do I just let it just be what it is? You know? And I think to discuss it as a new layer to that, which is actually, especially with another poet, it's actually like, do you see what I see? Like, do you do the same thing? And if you don't, that's interesting you do it that way. You know, it doesn't say anything about how I do it, but it just also, you do that too. You know, it's that recognition of other ways of viewing things. I think is so fascinating too. And on your question about like, what does it mean to be, like questioning that idea of what it means to be a poet, right? I feel like it's important for poets especially to ask them that, because it gives other people, empowers them to know that we're not here going, I am a poet because I do this, this, and this. We're just like freelancing it. We're just like, going, how do I feel today? Do I write a poem today? Because it gives them, because a lot of people, especially amongst my friend group, will go, oh, you're the poet. So you can say the things that I can't. I'm like, no, you can say it too. Like,
I think exposure to other poems and poets, poems, no. I'd say exposure to poets or people who write poetry is one of the only ways that I've grown in confidence using that label for myself. You know, I only started open mic performances about like 8 months ago now. Well, I mean, you were there, the first one. And just to see the people there and what they said, what their poems are about, what they were like, how short they were, how long they were. Did they sing them in a funny, weird way that was really clever? Or did they do a 10-minute long piece that I got lost in and then I got found again and then I lost again and then I found again? All of this was such news to me because I saw where I slotted in there and I thought, oh, I can write about that. I can, like, there was someone who I've met so many people through the open mics, but I've heard people writing poems about all kinds of things, from household objects to memories to people to political warfare to vaginas and like and I'm just like, I can write about that. Wow, like it's so hard not to sit down and make notes the whole way through because it's so inspiring. And before that, you know, just kind of finding your way online or whatever it is, it's very different. You do have imposter syndrome, but I think the more you perform in front of people, the less imposter syndrome you have. And I'll bring guests who don't write poetry and they'll come away being like, I want to write poems and come back.
Because it demystifies the idea of it, right? It kind of makes it like it is, because it's a human thing.
Yeah.
You go, oh, I have something to say too, because we all do, right?
Totally.
And they realize they don't have to kind of conform by this Shakespearean idea of like it has to be rhyming couplets and iambic pentameter and all these things. It's like, what do you feel? How can you say that in a kind of cool way? And it's like,
exactly,
everyone can do that.
Yeah, you know? And it's so, like all these things, it's so subjective, and like, you know, sometimes you're not gonna relate to or get or even like things that you hear, and then suddenly there'll be one thing that you hear and you'll be all in and you'll just feel, oh my god, and you'll feel speechless and you'll feel that kind of water filling up through your chest and the pressure's increasing, and suddenly, you know, and you never know. But I think there is that respect. I have a respect for anyone who gives it a go, and yeah,
I completely agree.
I'm lost.
I completely agree. It's like you're lost in the love of poetry. I get that too. Okay, so one of the things I always wanted to talk about too with another poet too is the idea of like the relationship between solitude and creation. And I think for me that manifests itself when I am so busy that I can't create. I'm also busy with life that I have all these ideas that I want to write down and like really like unpack, but it's like I don't, unless I like my life comes down a little bit and I'm like taking a long walk. I've got nothing to do, and then my mind will just kind of like start like structuring it a bit more, and then I can sit down and be like, okay, or like that feeling, allow that feeling to come up. We were talking before about like I need to write this poem, you know. And I think it's such an interesting thing because that dichotomy of that relationship is always something that I always struggled with, you know. And I also saw you right on your on your Instagram, you posted this thing about freelancing and being on Witness, and I really loved that. It's one of the things that you say that I relate to so much. But yeah, you were like to freelance is to be on Witness, and you had this example. You had this poem talking about how you were like kind of like watching people watching almost, but in such a poetic way. It was beautiful. But it was like, yeah, you keep, am I this person? And I related to that, being of the world but not in the world, you know. And it's like you can see things that most people just, you know, walk past by, but you have the vision, you have the kind of, you're the witness to it, but yourself is not, you're not witness. You kind of remove the self from the poem, and the poem becomes an expression of what you can see. Talk to me about that. Where did that feeling come from, first off, of like being on witness? What does that mean to you?
I love what you say. I love what you say about the solitude thing. I have so much to say about that too. But I think, so that poem, it was very much circumstantial. Like, I was where I am in the poem. I am seeing what I say I see in the poem. It's very literal. And it came from a profound sense of lack and loneliness. And I think it's one of those ones, like you said earlier, it's been brewing for a really long time. Like, and I think to be a freelancer is to be unwitnessed. It's, you spend so much time free. You're free, and that's like, woo, you're free. But no, you're free of all the things that make you feel needed. To be human is to be needed as well. Like, everyone, I feel like everyone's a trigger word. Like, everyone's like, you're not supposed to need anything. You're supposed to want, but you're not supposed to need. And I completely disagree. I think we are needing beings. I mean, it's one of the things that makes us not just a sort of unsentient mammal. Like, we feel that we need people to employ us, yes, but to play with us, to include us, to be our companion in later life, to gossip about your first date, whatever it is. Like, and as a freelancer, the life structure is very, very, very different, because you're in and out of things. And I think there is a general understanding of that. But I think a lot of people who aren't freelance, when they imagine being a freelancer, they don't then exclude all the people that they see every day in that imagination. They're like, oh yeah, I could have all this freedom all this time. But they don't think, but I wouldn't have met any of these people that I met through my 9 to 5 or the structure. You know, I didn't go to university, and I changed job every 6 months to every year up until the age of 23. So that community, on top of a freelance lifestyle, was brewing. And when I was walking around that day, I saw all these different people who, they weren't free. They had each other. And I didn't have that. And I think I thought to myself, you know, how it's very sad, but it's also a choice I'm making in order to live the life that I feel is necessary to be able to be inspired enough to create art. And if I didn't have this freedom and this solitude and this loneliness, then I wouldn't be able to express myself in the way that is most important to me. But this is the price that I'm paying, and that's to be unwitnessed most of the time.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I completely, 100% pinpoint that feeling that I was talking about, because it is a decision. I thought I was the only one who understood, but obviously all other people understand too. But it's such a unexplainable things that I can't even explain to my friends.
I just butchered it too. That took me a long, long time to figure out what I was trying to say.
But no, it's beautiful, because, like, honestly, because you have this idea that this lifestyle that you're chasing is going to be like this, you know, like, oh, I want to be a poet, I want to be free, I want to be able to express myself.
Yeah.
But what that comes with, you know, and I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Well, it comes at a great cost. And I know people who haven't got the same experience. I know some people who are creatives, who have very rich circles. And I'm not saying that I don't. I do. I have people I love who love me, but I, you know, due to various reasons, have spent a very large amount of time in solitude. And I think a lot of that is to do with having a later diagnosed autoimmune condition. It's a very lonely thing to have, and you tend to isolate yourself because people only have a certain bandwidth for support and patience. Unfortunately, it's just true. And especially in this country, we have a very can-do, you know, suck it up kind of attitude. And I do know people who are able to create beautiful work and beautiful writing and still have very rich, full lives and not spend much time in solitude. But I do know that I don't work like that. Like, inspiration doesn't really come to me unless I've been mulling things over. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but whatever. Most of my writing comes from intense periods of loneliness.
I completely agree.
Even the joyful stuff.
I completely agree, because you need time to reflect, right?
Yeah.
Like I wrote this thing that I haven't kind of formulated quite yet. I think more amazing because I'm still thinking about this idea, but about like how I feel like sometimes I feel like poetry has distanced myself from my friends, or like the act of me writing poetry. Like I have deep relationship with friends and I care about them deeply, but it kind of feels like, it's like did my need for to be understood get lost in the metaphors and the similes, and it's like, because it's like if I express myself, and we come back to what we were talking about before, if I express myself in a way, I can only really express myself in a way you understand, almost through poetry. Because like once you understand the poetry, or it feels like they try to understand me through poetry, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like they go, oh, like, like there's this disconnect that I'm feeling, and maybe I'm still thinking about this, right? But it's a disconnect that I'm feeling between them meeting me and like having that relationship that we had before, and them going, oh, like, like I read this poem about you. What did you mean by that? And I'm like, oh, but like I'm me, like before the poet, I'm still me. It kind of feels a disconnect between them trying to understand, and so I pull myself back, and it's like all of that just jumbled up in my mind. I'm trying to like untangle it.
How much of your poetry do you feel like is you trying to speak to yourself on a subject, or you trying to communicate outwardly to others?
I think a lot of them is to speak to myself, but I think recently, because of that tension, I'm finding sometimes like I want to say something to to others almost, like that would slip in because that's part of how I feel. That makes sense, It's like I only ever would use poetry to express a feeling, and when I first started, it was free, and I was like, okay, cool, I can just express.
It's always easier when you start.
Literally, right?
You're like, oh, such an original thought. Like, and then after a while, you're like, how many times do I need to talk about the clouds before I like, come on.
How many times am I going to say the same thing again?
Yeah.
Different ways. And
oh God.
And it's that feeling of like, okay, have I said this too much, or am I, again, it's one of those things.
I feel like we shouldn't even filter that either. It's just, we're all obsessed with novelty. I'm so obsessed with novelty. It's a fatal flaw. But it's the kind of constant need for everything in itself to be its own work of art that's separate in every total other way from anything else you've ever written. And so what if you have 6 love poems that all sound the same? Like, if you recycle the same lines in new poems and things, I'm starting to make myself be okay with that, because sometimes things fit better elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Like, that's something I'm trying to work on. And I think it sucks, to be honest, in a way, because I used to write poetry out of necessity. Like, I needed to write something because I didn't feel okay if I didn't. Whereas now, I have a very different relationship with writing, where I feel like it's something I want to experiment with now. I want to experiment with my writing. I want to see how I can shape something. Maybe I do have an inspirational thought and I want to see where I can weave it, but I'm so much more conscious, whereas I used to be unconscious. And part of me almost grieves the period of time where I wasn't trying to experiment and improve. I was just needing to. Now it definitely feels more like I'm putting effort in, not out of a want to best my old self, but because that I'm at a different place now with my writing, and it's harder now. It's that whole scale. I can't remember. I never remember. I always refer to it, and then I give a horrible analogy of it. But
that one there?
the one where you're like unconscious, or what is it? You're unaware, and then you become incredibly aware of how much you lack, and then you become competent. If anyone listens to this and knows what I'm referring to, then that you'll know what I'm trying to say. But it's always hard being in that second stage of being aware of how far there is, or where there is to experiment, or the number of avenues you can take. It's just,
that's 100% true. Speaking of that,
it's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming, but we push through poetry itself, right? We kind of use poetry as a way to deal with that overwhelmingness.
Yeah.
And the topic of that, I want to talk about your process for a little bit, right? Okay. So we mentioned before solitude and how important solitude is for that. How important do you think solitude is to you, to your specific process? Do you need it to create, or can you create when you're kind of feeling happy and everything's going great?
I have only got a couple of examples of ever creating happy. Most of my poems come from negative emotions, secondary negative emotions. It's not so much sadness or anger, because I know what they are. They're angry and sad, but it's the secondary emotions that are harder to unravel for yourself, which is why they end up in poems. So it's betrayal, or resentment, or sort of apprehension or anxiety or depression, a lot of those things, because they're hard. It's hard to figure out the root cause, and I think a lot of people have, especially now in the modern era of like online psychologists and stuff, we're always trying to intellectualize how we feel, pinpoint it down to one thing so we can address it and feel better, instead of actually just feeling it through. Whatever it is that's making me feel that way, better to just feel it and then stop feeling it after you felt it. No one does that because it's uncomfortable and horrible. I don't do that. And so most of my poems are very much, I think, processing those feelings and then negative. Whereas I do have a couple that come from utter surprise at how wonderful a feeling feels. And I'm like, oh, I want to capture this now. Like, this isn't I need to discover and express myself. This is I want to capture this moment. And I felt it a couple times, namely with gratitude and attraction. Those are normally the ones. And wonder, when something is wondrous. Like, yeah. That noise is wondrous. That's a really interesting noise.
Your mind just goes to the, how can I try to capture that? On that point.
It's very Jacob Collier.
I think this is a great question to ask, actually. So I'm fascinated by the scattered thoughts and how poets' mind works. My mind works exactly the same. I was trying to like focus, but I knew you could hear it too, and I knew that because you could hear it, I could hear it, we were going to get moved out of the moment. Talk to me about the scattered thoughts when it comes to poetry. How do you take scattered thoughts and form a semblance of a cohesive poem?
Okay, I need to use an analogy for this. I don't I don't gather scattered thoughts and put them into a poem. I think that's why I don't choose to sit down and write, and that's why it's worse when I do. I have tidal waves of emotion that just fall out. They just happen. And then the aftermath is me configuring and maybe slightly tidying up. So it comes like that. It's like, this never creates a poem, but when it's one wall forcing it out, then I'll write that down. And the aftermath is so calm once it's out that it can be formed. But it's never, I don't form scattered thoughts. The one thing I would say is, because there's always a million things racing around and a lot of different interpretations and feelings from the scatterbrain, sometimes there'll just be a little thought that goes by that's beautiful metaphor, or something suddenly makes sense. It's so silly, but I made a banana bread a while ago, like a month ago, and the process of making that banana bread was really similar to how I was feeling about something that I was experiencing. So I wrote a whole poem about the banana bread and how I was so happy that I finally found the right banana to make the bread with, but I was worried I wasn't getting the recipe right, and like, maybe I've set the oven too hot too soon, you know, like it was a whole thing, and I was like, oh. But that was definitely a lot more of a little self-indulgent, like, oh, let's see how I can make this into a poem.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. I would be really interested to do a study comparing the poetry of someone with more of a, I'm not going to use any of the scientific terms, but more of an erratic mind compared to the poetry of somebody with a much more pragmatic, calmer, sort of singular thought following mind.
I think it would be interesting to see
the difference between their product, and whether actually there isn't one, and it's more. I want to know now. Let's do a tally chart.
I almost feel like the erratic mind would be more predisposed to the idea of poetry than the pragmatic one, and not to
I think you're
generalize.
Right. No, I do think you're probably right.
Because there's the idea of like you're catching ideas out of thin air almost, like, or like you having the idea about the banana bread. You have to have a bit of a, like, you know, like, it's like your mind will make connections. And I often feel like this too, like the way I write too, it's like I'll be living life and it's something I call it salient. It'll be more salient to me. Like, and the thought will be more like, ooh, that explains something, or that relates to something, or that it's an completely internal, completely intuition. But as I get better and better at poetry, I understand those intuitions more. I can like almost like feel them come and go. I don't let them go as much as before. You know, it's like, oh, like I get, like that makes sense to me, and I can put a lot of things that make sense to me together to make a poem that makes sense. But like, you know, the words and the phrasing might not make sense in a moment, you know?
Yeah.
It might just be a phrase from something I heard, or like me walking around and I see something, my mind will just erupt. I think that's the aspect of it.
It's a trigger.
And the pragmaticness is that, okay, how can I form this into something that makes sense to me? Almost like, what am I trying to say? How do I like strip back what I'm trying to say to make it more, you know?
Do you mind ever writing something about dogs barking? No. Do you ever mind writing things that don't make sense to you?
Yeah, I do that sometimes. And so recently, and I'll give you an example. Recently, I've done that with I've been going through like a spiritual journey. And so like I've really found a new wave of understanding when it comes to religion. But it's just at the beginning. So like I had like a massive inspirational turn where it's like I'm saying things that make sense to me spiritually, but my rational mind doesn't understand it.
Okay.
That makes sense. You know, like my rational mind is like, okay, what are you trying to say? Like, and I perform, and I really recognize when I perform it to people, because I perform it to people, and I'm like, they have no idea what I'm talking about, but they can pick up some sort of like metaphor, some sort of like, okay, maybe he's trying to say this, but it doesn't. It's such a unique experience based on my specific relationship to something. I think it's, you know, like universal, almost, that it's hard for me to even pinpoint it down, you know?
I think that's beautiful. I think something I really want to allow myself to do more is to write things that are less conversational, but they don't make sense. And I think that's okay. I mean, a lot of the poetry I grew up studying, which, as we have clarified, is not very much, a lot of that poetry it made so little sense to me. You know, you'd spend 3 different English classes trying to break down what was meant by this and come up with your own meaning. And you know what? I remember getting really stressed about it and asking my teacher, I was a question asker, but I asked her, but what if we're not getting it right? We're just speculating what this poem means. We're saying what we think is the correct answer to what he meant in this line. But we can never ask him because he's gone. So we're just projecting ideas. And it used to really trouble me when the teacher said, correct, that's what that metaphor means. Says who?
As if he even knew.
Says who? And then I got really angry. I was like, miss, what do you mean? You don't know.
I was the exact same way.
And I feel like, yes.
I was the exact same way.
Inquisitive minds. But I feel like that in a way should be a lesson to be okay. Like if you write a poem that's just no formed sentences, just word after word after word after word, I think that's okay. I think I'm talking to myself right now, but I think that's okay.
I think we almost always are talking to ourselves when we
It's okay, Marina.
It's okay.
It's
okay. On that topic then, actually, I wanted to ask the question, how do you navigate the gap between poems that make sense to you and how the audience receives it? You know, it's like, I think there's always like a tension between, like you were mentioning before, about when someone analyzes a poem, you know, imagine 100 years from now, they're going to analyze the poem by Marina. Oh, Winnie.
Oh, God.
And so like they're going, okay, this is what she meant. This is what she meant. I knew it because we understand the narrative structures and, you know, at the time and the context, and this is what definitely she meant. And the class, some kid in that classroom going, but miss, what if she was just...
Oh, I would love that kid.
She's just really like banana bread. But how do you as the poet navigate that? Do you let go of that perception of your art once you've finished writing it? Do you just give up any semblance of being understood for what you try to say?
I think I struggle with the idea of it not being understood how I meant, especially stuff that is very much something I look forward to being spoken. But I think because one of the most important things for me with my poetry is not for people to understand me, it's for them to hopefully relate. Like there are 1 or 2 poems that I want them to understand me. Maybe it's me trying to say how I feel about a subject. But a lot of the time this is a thing I've noticed about this feeling in this situation, in this scenario. How about you? Do you get that? When you hear this, do you think of something that's happened to you too? And I think if that is open to interpretation and people will understand different things, then that's okay, as long as they can feel something, as long as something has been triggered in their mind or their experience bank or something that they hope to happen one day even. I think that's okay. I just want more people. I want to be able to reach people, and I think it frustrates me the most. I want to be able to reach as many people as possible in the hope that as many people can maybe say, oh, me too. And it's not me trying to be like, oh, my poetry can change the world, but like, it's more that I always feel so much when I come across the most obscure person online that I've never like seen before. I have 12 followers, and I'm obscure to them. But like that poem, I'm so glad I found it because it describes perfectly how I feel in that specific moment. And I wish that we were able to reach more people. And ironically, we can't because of the algorithm.
Algorithms.
Which you'll be on soon.
We're already on it. It's too late. We're on the algorithm too already. I think what makes it interesting though is like, for example, how we met on the open mic poetry, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the new, and I think community like that is so refreshing because you will literally have someone come up to you after the poem and be like, oh my God, I love your poems. Them already having made a poem that you love. You're thinking, I want to talk to you about your poem, was incredible.
Yeah.
And they're asking you about your poem, and they're like,
no, you, I want to talk about your poem. Yeah.
Because it's so fascinating to see that. And I think that conversations that you have after that, when you're going back and forth about, well, what did you mean by this? Or like, not even what did you mean? Like, what inspired this? Because I want to know if what I thought about that inspiration was correct. Because actually, I've written a poem that's similar, or like, I never seen it spoken about like that before.
Yeah.
Like, what are those conversations like? Talk to me a little bit more about the community that you found in these open mics and that kind of feeling that you get from it.
Oh, I've met so many wonderful people so far. And I've communicated with people that I would in no other circumstance have probably met. I don't even know where to start. I think there's been some interactions that have reminded me. I've had interactions that have reminded me how insignificant I am in the big scheme of things. I've had interactions where someone I know called B, she's written a poem about eye drops. I don't know if you were there, but like, her mind, I was like, I see your mind. And I have so many eye drops in my room, and I love this so much. And meeting her was amazing, and especially like sometimes some of the more mature people in the community, in the poetry community, and they'll write things with a completely different energy. A lot of the time, it's so much lighter, so much less burdened, so much less confused, so much more clear, and I feel like there's a very big correlation between certain age groups and certain topics people write about, and I see this wonderful kind of lightness, this jovial joy, and jovial joy, this love for playing with a little concept and making songs about it. And I'll meet people like that, and I'll just think, God, you make me excited to grow up. Like,
when I grow up,
I want to be,
I want to be a jovial joy poet.
I want to be a jovial, joyful poet. God, listen to me.
But no, I completely agree.
There's never enough time to talk.
I know.
Which is why it's so nice to be here. But I've always wanted to talk more, and there's always a bit of a strange period of time after you've performed or after you're talking to people who've performed, because they're not in a receiving, they're in a self-conscious sort of, a lot of the people will black out after they've read stuff, and they don't even really think that you're talking to them because you mean it. They think you're just trying to appease them, like that you
just came off stage.
And it's like, oh, so good. It's like, but actually, most of the time, people really mean that.
Yeah.
And they don't have to say it, and no one owes you anything. And I think it's hard to get through to the real person at open mics, to them, not their art, like you were saying, because you go with your I'm reading poetry cap on.
Absolutely.
And you don't think anyone else wants to meet you and talk to you about your life, and neither does anyone else really. And so I think it's something that I'd like to get more and more immersed in, because I couldn't honestly answer. I think the reason I'm rambling is because I don't think I can honestly answer you and say that I have, met a lot of people through the poetry environment. I haven't met a lot of people. I've met a lot of poets. But I haven't met a lot of people because there's never enough time or I've not been able to delve into them,
Mm.
and I would like that. Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry, I'm complaining a lot in this. I'm a perfectionist.
don't
I
apologize.
always want more.
Anything.
I want more everything.
But no, literally, this is why we're here today, because that feeling that you had, I consciously had that, and I was talking to a lot of my friends about it. It's like me and these cool people at poetry. I know we're relating because they're saying stuff. I'm like, this is incredible. Like, I wish I wrote that. You know, I wish, you know what I mean? Like,
I do get that.
Like, I wish I had their mind to see that situation, how they see it.
Yeah.
But even more interesting than that, I wish I knew the person behind it, you know, because I think, like, you're completely right. It's so fascinating when you are also right in two fronts too. Like, when you come off stage, especially, like, for example, for me, right, I'll be like on stage, like, kind of hosting and performing, and then when I come off stage and people want to speak to me, I want to speak to them, but I'm so like you're yeah.
It's adrenaline. It's not a conscious thing. It's
you can't really receive the person and be like, okay, let's sit down and really talk to me about your poem. You have like 2 minutes or 5 minutes, or for me, I'm working, so I've got to be. So it's, but I want to be able to sit down and be like, actually, no, because I know there's a person in there with what you said. Like, I relate to what you said so much. I know there's something we can talk about or share. We can like discuss this idea, or like even the process behind it. I want to talk to you as a poet. But
it's ironic. It's ironic because we go up there and we share the most deep, profound, look at me, I tear my clothes open, you see straight through me. And we all do that. And then we come to talk about it afterwards. You get the compliments and my clothes are right back on. And I'm like, clown mask on. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much.
You too. Actually, I really like this, but please believe me.
Yeah.
It's all suddenly, it's just what we have to do to exist.
Yeah, and it's funny
in this sick city, sorry.
We're writing poems about that specific thing. All of us are writing poems around it, about that specific feeling, or trying to like strip off that.
Yeah.
But it almost just like closes up a hydra. You cut one head off another. But I think, I think, and I'm trying to find ways to kind of like foster that, because I think that is, you know, you made the joke about poetry saving the world, and I say that all the time. I say poetry will save the world, and it's not that poetry can literally save the world. I think people having a different relationship to themselves can save the world, and I think that's what poetry forms. It forms a relationship to yourself, and then obviously to other people, you know.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's a lot to think about if you want to really go deep down that thought and think about how it could save the world. That's a whole other thing.
Let's do that.
It's like, oh God,
talk to me.
No.
We've got time.
Oh,
how would you think? I'm that guy. I'm exactly that. How do you think poetry, from your perspective, or even when I want to ask even more personal question, how has poetry saved your world?
That's easy to answer.
Go on.
Poetry has validated my experience over and over and over again. For myself, and then share it and take something that can feel often at times so ugly and uncomfortable inside and make it something that it dances on the ears, or I think there's something very satisfying about understanding someone's poem. I think when you understand someone's poem, you feel like you are understood at the same time as understanding them, and it also feels like a little gift, because it's like, I understand this, and it's almost self-gratuitous in a way. But you're like, oh yeah, like, oh, I understand, I got the metaphor, oh, it all wraps up with a bow and boom, 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 gift. And I think that when you can offer that out of this, it feels like a saving moment. It's like, if you take, for example, the thing I mentioned earlier around, let's say, body dysmorphia, and I wrote this thing, and as you can imagine, that felt horrible, and it had felt horrible for a really long time. Then you make that gift and you send it forward, and other people open it up, and suddenly you feel like you've given. And I feel like a lot of the time people say, you know, you've got to do a good act every day, because if you do a good act every day, then not only is that helping others, but it's also going to make you more joyful. In a way, I guess there's religion in there too. That I think poetry in a way can do that, because it's generous. And I am very, very adamant about being generous with your feelings. And I think it can be really sad when you meet people who consider generosity of emotion and feeling as shoving it on you instead of sharing it with you. And there are people like that. And I think that that's probably answering the question earlier, the difference between people who do and don't understand poetry or want to own the word poet. Because if you're someone that considers that as a sharing gift or as something that's generous instead of someone that's loading it on you or dumping it on you or whatever, that is a very different attitude. And I think that for me, poetry and starting that and receiving that and sharing that feels very much like a generous environment to be in, or a generous act to do, even if it's just for yourself. And I think that's probably how poetry has saved me.
That is a fantastic answer.
Is it?
Woo! That was amazing answer. Every word you said in that was amazing. 100% agree. You even tied it back to before when you brought up that question about how it means to be. I completely agree. I think you're 100% right. It is a given thing, because when you were saying it clicked for me. It's like 100%. That's true. I think that's the relationship that I think I've had to kind of deal with within myself about being a poet or so much. I don't see myself as different from my friends, right? I don't see myself any different. Of course I don't. But they see me as different from them. And I always struggle with that, like, why? And it's like, because I give feelings freely.
Yeah.
I share feelings.
I really understand that.
You know? And I share feelings, and they go like, I couldn't do that. I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course you could.
A lot of the time sharing feelings is an invitation for the other to share back.
And when they don't, I feel
that you feel terrible, because you're like, oh no, like it's not even like you feel like you've given too much. It feels like you've it's hard to explain it. Yeah. And I think that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. God, I want to write a poem about it right now, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, because I've spent a lot of time over the last however long in the company of people like that who consider me in the same way that you described to be different, in the sense that I give a lot in that way, and they don't see it as giving. They see it as loading. And I think that can be really sad, because I think it's very much part of a person when you're like that, and that means the people they're not just rejecting that you've overshared or that you're very deeply feeling, they're rejecting you. And then sometimes you have this joyous moment when you meet someone who's like, oh my God, you just shared all of this. Oh my gosh, let me share all of this back for you. And you're like, oh, thank you. And then it just becomes a game, a really, really mushy game of ping pong. And it's really nice.
And it's really beautiful.
And it is. And it lifts you up instead of making you feel shame.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's what the poetry community does for people.
Absolutely. It opens you up. It makes you, it encourages you to do it more. It's like, share more. Because that's one thing everyone will always say, please come back again.
I think if people don't feel like that in the poetry community for whatever reason, then they're in the wrong place.
Yes, yeah.
If you go into the poetry community and think, oh gosh, that was a bit much. What are you doing? Of course it's a lot. It's a poetry community.
I always say that to my friends. I'm like, you're going to get a lot, but you're also going to get a lot.
It's like going to a comedy mic and be like, that was a bit funny, wasn't it? Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it says at the door, it's going to be a bit much.
Warning.
It's going to expect a bit much. Okay, this has been amazing, but let's wrap it up. I always wanted to ask, and I love asking poets, not to kind of like to look into the future a little bit. What, as yourself, as a poet, speaking as a poet now, what do you think your growth is going to be like? What do you think in terms of writing, in terms of sharing, in terms of being able to like access different feelings and emotions and, you know, sharing that with people or a number of people? What do you think your growth as a poet is going to be like? Or what do you aspire for it to be like going forward?
Wow. I'm not very good at manifestation. I never have been. I feel like things do happen to me instead of me, you know. Okay. Well, something that I've noticed, that I've realized recently, I think will definitely help my forward trajectory, which is that to be a very emotional person is not to be overly emotional or overly dramatic. It's to be deeply alive. And I think now that I know that, it means that there is a very positive future in whatever way in terms of my writing journey. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, I think there's going to be a dip. I think there needs to be a dip for the next rise. I think that I've been really enjoying this place, but I can feel a slowing pace. And I think it's because I'm, as a person, am going through changes. And I think a lot of my writing does come with me at the time, but I think a lot of it is also in hindsight. And I think that in order to have the hindsight, it needs to happen first. And I can feel it happening right now. So I think in terms of what I'm writing, there will be a lull and there'll be another calm before another storm. in terms of where I want to take it and where I want it to go. I think I want to carry on sharing at poetry open mics.
Let's go.
But actually, let's be honest, I want to publish. I want to publish my first anthology.
100%.
Because it's growing to the point now where there are a couple of different clumps that could create different little shorts, and I would love to do that. But it would obviously be a self-publishing situation. But I think I'd really enjoy doing that, because I think that in itself would be inspiring for future writing.
Absolutely.
And then by doing that, I would meet a whole new group of people who are doing that. They're putting it to paper, and a lot of my community is spoken word, and it would be really interesting to enter that. But I would love to collaborate. I think that's my next thing. I've been writing a lot of songs that start as poems, and I think, no, this is a song, and I would love to do more of that too.
I think I can see all of that for you, especially when you talk about publishing. I think like your poems are so relatable and so beautifully put, and like honestly, I relate to it. So I know a lot of people are going to relate to it. You know, that's kind of how I view things. Not that I am everyone else.
I mean, I can
relate to it. So it's definitely going to be a bestseller. It's going to go crazy.
No, but like, you know, I'm getting to know you, but I think we've had very different lives already, and I think that in itself is lovely to hear that you relate to my writing despite that. So and I relate to yours.
And I think that's because
I get so lost in yours, Jeff. Like I need to hear all yours more and more because there's so much there. I think we have a very different writing style in that sense. Mine, I think, is more of a rolling hill situation, and I feel like yours is it's different. I feel like once I've got up to that mountain, you know, Tabletop Mountain. Is it called Tabletop Mountain? It's in South Africa.
Yeah.
And it's like this is such a weird I'm so sorry. My brain's gone off.
Now we have to search it up. Stop the video, go search up Tabletop and come back.
I don't even think it's called Tabletop Mountain. I think I just call it that. But it's a very flat, it's very big mountain, but it's flat at the top. And I think like once you've got there, you're carried through with yours. And that's so lovely. But that hike...
It's so interesting you mentioned that, because like, speak for myself, I think I'm going to have like you mentioned, like a lull, because right now I feel my style is changing, or my style needs to change, because like we spoke about before about how when I speak it kind of, to me, it makes sense. So I'm speaking it, but I don't understand how it's being received by the audiences, that they're hearing for the first time. They're trying to dissect all these ideas, and so like I'm having to like simplify them a little bit, or like have more of a conversational tone to it, where I take them through what are the ideas I'm speaking about.
Yeah, from my experience, I wouldn't want to hear you simplifying your ideas at all. I think I just want to, I need time to digest them. I love all your ideas, Jeff. I want to hear them more. Hear them more in terms of frequency of times I hear your poems, but I also want to hear them, maybe, like you said, maybe you'll want to maybe experiment with a conversational style and format is really interesting for that, because it means that there's time to ponder all the wonderful things that you say.
And even for myself, I mean, style, I think like you mentioned, there's a process. I guess I am a person that's growing as my poetry grows, and so like maybe my mind is dense at a certain point in my time, so my poetry is dense. But then when it gets clarity, when it gets like more focused on one thing, or like I can focus on one little leaf rather than looking at the whole forest going, oh my God, this forest is amazing. Then it will change. The style will change. Where I can like zone in on the leaf and have the same kind of depth, but with that kind of one thing. And I think that's also kind of, you know, the process coming. And I think even all of that's encapsulated in this thing where I feel like I need time. Like I'm in this process of my life, and especially with my poetry, it's like I have so much ideas, but I don't know how to translate them. You know, and I think
it's all down to that force thing we talked about earlier. Like right back at the beginning, forcing yourself to spit out something that you're going through right now is very, like, that's a lot to ask of yourself. Like, let me analyze what I'm living right now, in this moment, right now, who I am, how that's a lot. Like, that's some psychoanalytical bullshit there. Like, I think that's why it's so much easier to romanticize or reminisce on or nostalgic. Like, I think that's why there's so many breakup poems. That's why there's so many breakup poems or grief poems, because that's not happening right now. It happened, and now you're feeling everything. And now because you're feeling everything, you can see everything in a way. And I think that,
it kind of comes back to that point about you are a poet, the art, and then the hindsight thing, because you're a person that's writing the poems, and so the only way you can even your mind can go through these ideas is when you've kind of like lived them, or you kind of had time to ponder on them, and then you can, if it's like a two-step process, if you ponder on them, then you can have some space to kind of like verbalize it in a way which makes sense to you before you can make sense to another person.
Yeah, and that's a specific style as well. I mean, it's something, to be honest, I think is a really good challenge. I think a lot of my writing is definitely a nostalgic tone or something that I'm reflecting on, and I think that there's many styles where people talk about things, because also a lot of the stuff you and I have talked about are personal experience poetry. Like, so some people write about current affairs and other things external. We haven't really talked about that, but I guess it's because it's not really my style, and I think you write what you know, and it's not that I don't know these things, but I think that you have to write honestly. And I think if you honestly have a very mad inner world in your head, a lot of the stuff that you write about will be things that you've pondered upon that have been your own experience. But some people are able to write about right now, and some people write about ponders for the future. But all of that has to have a slightly sort of nostalgic... It has to be removed from living it. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Final question I had was to give some advice to people watching. I know everyone hates this.
Who am I to do that?
You're the one in the hot seat right now, so you're the only person I can ask right now. Yeah. But yeah, for a poet, someone that's been writing for a while, and they feel like, oh, like I relate to everything you spoke about today. I relate to this, but I don't really call myself a poet. But like, what Marina's saying, I feel like I could do this. What would you say to them? What would you say to them about like how to follow that feeling, and like kind of build on that feeling, or that curiosity about poetry, so they can also like take this journey themselves?
I would say, when you're writing, once you've put the pen to paper, or you're texting on your notes app, or you're doing a voice note, don't ever think about what someone else is going to say. Like, don't think, oh, they're going to think this. Like, even if you're writing it for someone or about someone, don't think, oh, they're going to perceive this like that, because you have absolutely no control over what people perceive in your writing. It's got to be from you, for you, from a place that... It's got to come from a place that you really believe. And whether that's, I really believe that this worm looks like a train that's going to fall off a cliff, or whatever it is you think, put it down. It's not stupid. It's never stupid. It might be stupid when you look back and read it a week later and then you turn it into something else. But what you think in that moment is never stupid when it comes to poetry. It's just an idea. And if you hold it back, you may as well be trying to run holding your breath, because you're just blocking. So firstly, if you feel like you want to try writing poetry, try writing poetry. And just try it. It's lovely. It's cool. You're really cool if you want to do that. You're so cool. Like us.
So cool. We're so cool.
It is. It's so beautiful. It's a timeless thing. There's a reason why it's why people are like, oh yeah, roses are red, violets are blue. It's because it's timeless and it's beautiful, and give it a go. And yeah, that's probably all I'd say. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. No, honestly, it's true. Like, you are 100% right. Everything you've said has been true.
Yeah.
Give it a go. See what comes out. Share it. Hopefully we'll see you perform one day, because I think it's one of those things where as you do it, you kind of find yourself in the most like personal and roundabout way, because you develop as you write, it's like
You do.
You're both the page and the pen and the words, everything. And that's such a metaphorical, poetic way to put it, but it's kind of the truth where you discover that.
And I think one of the most important things to know is that sometimes the closest people to you are the least likely to understand what you mean, because they know you so well, but they're never going to know inside your head. And I think sometimes, for some reason, I don't know the psychoanalytical reason, but sometimes strangers will get you in your writing so much more than your mum or your best friend or your partner. And that's okay.
100%. That's okay. I mean, I have ideas of why that happens. I think there's a kind of a projection. I think sometimes, like, if you know someone, you kind of have the projection of them in your head.
Yeah.
But then they are growing always. And so they are seeing themselves as they really are, or as they could be. And you struggle with that. You're like, wait, no, I don't understand. You're not supposed to understand. That's the point.
No.
They're like struggling to be understood, because if they don't understand you, then can they really call you your friend? But you have to give your friend space. You have to give them space to go. You have to give them space to surprise you. And like, poetry is the most radical way people can surprise you. You can hear them talk about something like, oh my God, I did not know you had that all in your head. Where it's like, yeah, of course, you know?
I think poetry can be a very loyal friend.
The best friend ever. BFF.
It can.
Absolutely.
It can.
Absolutely.
It's a melodramatic one, though. A very melodramatic friend. There we go.
But yeah, thank you so much, Marina.
Thank you, Jeff. It's been fun.
This has been amazing. I look forward to seeing you perform again. I look forward to seeing more of what you do. I think, like I said before, you have an amazing voice as a poet. You have this amazing honesty to be able to tackle like personal but also like important issues that you really feel, and like ways that you can like communicate that to people that even not from your same environment or even the same like lifestyle, like anyone like not even that doesn't understand exactly what you're talking about, you can bring them in with your voice and with the way you describe things, and it like kind of like makes them listen and like makes them pay attention and then reflect, which I think is such a beautiful skill. Like they can...
Even right now, it's so hard to believe what you say.
I know.
But thank you.
But that's fine, because like the poetry speaks for itself. And I think when you write your own poetry and you read it back and you go, I kind of like this, or I kind of like understand what I'm saying, or this kind of helps, like that will be like the defining term if you really think other people understand. Because you are right, we're too in it. We are the elephant.
We're like, yeah, that's what you think, cool.
That's what you think. It's like, we don't even want to accept it. That's
cool.
That's the poetry. That's the poet, like the kind of like tension between I can express myself, but I'm also like very like protective of like my ideas and like the thoughts that I have.
The clown.
Literally.
The clown.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. You're amazing. You're incredible.
Thank you. This is awesome. Sitting under the shard. It's been great.
It's been great. You can't even see this.
You can't even see the shard, but the shard's right there.
The shard's right there. It's towering over us and paying attention. But yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time. Peace.
Ciao.